Okay, we're going to let people flow in and we're going to get started. And a very warm welcome from around the world to our 15th Security Thought Leadership webinar. And today we're going to be talking about what next for corporate security, what the implications are from COVID-19. And this is a topic actually that's been cropping up in very different ways on the first 14 webinars. And we've been encouraged to get some corporate security experts to talk thoughtfully about how we can take and understand better the implications going forward, because they're considerable, of course. Whatever happens in corporate security has a knock-on effect for the world of suppliers too. So in a second, I'm going to be introducing our four panelists. Just to say to you around the world that if you would like to ask a question, you have a question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Can I ask you to ask your question on that button? I will first of all ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Once all four have done that, I will then ask each of them for their opening statement, and then we'll come to your questions. I might ask them directly, or I might build them into broader questions. So on this very important topic, let's get started. And I'm going to ask Martin first, please, to introduce yourself.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everyone. Thank you for providing this opportunity. By way of an introduction, I'm Martin Dunkley. I'm the Director of Security Risk for Royal Mail Group. Thank you.
And from Martin in the UK to Bob over in the United States. Bob.
Thanks, Martin. Bob Hayes. I'm a practitioner for about the last 30 years, and for the last 17, I've been the Managing Director of the Security Executive Council.
Thank you, Bob. And next to Jane.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon, everyone, from sunny London. So it's Jane King, Head of Security at Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust.
Thank you. And finally, over to the Netherlands, where we're going to find Glen.
Today, I'm Glen Schoon. I'm the CEO of Boardroom at Crisis. I do security and crisis management consulting worldwide.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'm going to ask each of the panel then for their opening statements. And once they've all finished their opening statements, I'll come to any questions you might have. Don't forget to use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Martin, your opening statement first, please.
Thank you, Martin. I want to cover two key areas. The first being the value of corporate security as an informed expert in the COVID-19 pandemic. Leading up to this pandemic, my corporate security team were actually on a transformational journey, and it's fair to say that corporate security were really stress tested as a result of the contribution required from us to support the business. At a corporate level, we've been able to demonstrate a higher level of flexibility in terms of influencing, and very positively, we were seen to be providing some innovative, commercially focused solutions. However, we were invited to the planning table, but there were some notable exceptions, and we were either forgotten or occasionally considered too late. And the reason for this, well, in my mind, I think corporate security has not been regarded as a core or a strategic function, and some of the commercial benefits have not always been understood. We don't market our services particularly well. I think some of our own people have actually been reluctant or unable to bring their own experience or skills to the heart of the changing business culture. So for me, the corporate security in the pandemic environment was really about showing the right culture and behaviours, about removing complexities that enabled us to provide workable solutions. It was about speaking the language of the business and looking through the same lens, and very much acting as enablers with a greater degree of proactivity. That leads me on to my second point, really, about in a post-COVID environment, corporate security engagement, both with its internal stakeholders and indeed suppliers. It's about taking people with us to remove the barriers so that we have constructive collaboration and engagement with corporate security. The kind of words I'm thinking about is commercial acumen, business players being able to predict and anticipate and adapt to the commercial needs of the business and its customers. Now, what I'm basically saying here is corporate security must be forward-looking. It needs to be integrated and have the pulse of the internal customers. Some of the internal relationships, I think, might need recalibration post-COVID-19. Some of the contingencies that we put in place, in fairness, we might be able to stand back and use that as a proof of concept and really push the boundaries about where security can provide advice, guidance, and allow the business to operate in a competitive environment. And strangely enough, whilst vulnerabilities may have been exposed through interim contingencies, equally, I think more positively, it might have identified some opportunities. For me particularly, I'm going to have to look, ironically, at suppliers. And actually, something we might want to debate later is that in my environment, I can actually see a greater requirement and resilience on suppliers as I look to maybe outsource opportunities that I hadn't explored in the past. And for me, it's about going in security with an open mind, not a closed mind, to the opportunities that it presents for us to market ourselves and truly deliver value to our business.
Martin, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate your points. I'm now going to go to Bob Hayes over in the United States. Bob, over to you.
Thanks, Martin. We're essentially a research and services company. We've been talking to about 25 people a week around the world. We have about 40,000 people in our total community. From that, we've learned a lot about this, and I want to make a couple points because it'll frame up, I think, a lot of the comments I'm going to make and hopefully not confuse everybody. One, we've identified 9 stages of the pandemic, and some of the stuff's on our website for free. You can go look at it, and we're starting to fill in all of the roles and issues that affected security in each of those stages. And the first 4 are really light because we didn't get this done during those first 4 stages. But in these last 5, we're finding a lot of very unique and different ways that people are being involved in this. Which brings me to the second point. There's very seldom, although everybody in the world is working on the exact same thing, everybody's doing it differently. Every company culture, every situation, every type of organization has different challenges, and so there's no one size fits all. It's really a matter of going through a process to find, I think, the best answer. The last thing that I'd bring up on this is that it's a continuum. We have people that are absolutely leading globally in a lot of their practices, the things that they're doing. They're first in many of these different stages. And literally we have people asking questions where they're just now starting to manage the event. And some of that's because of the stages that it rolled out globally, but there's also companies that are probably didn't have a corporate security person. 25% of the Fortune 500 in the United States, 25% of the 500 biggest companies still do not have an identifiable CSO or head of security. So we're seeing companies that are, to Martin's point, there's not even any security there to point out what they can do. So we're seeing this massive continuum of what you've already accomplished, others haven't started. And so as you're questioning this, you really have to kind of assess where you are in the stages in responding to the pandemic and where you and your company's risk appetite is in managing the response to the pandemic. So it's very hard to say that any of us represent security. We represent a very, very, very narrow slice that's in our purview. And that makes it very challenging.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Very interesting statistic, that one is. Next, I'm going to go to Jane. Jane, your opening statement, please.
Okay, thank you, Martin. So, as I said earlier, so Jane King, Head of Security at Guy's and St Thomas's. So we're going to come at this from a slightly different level because, of course, with the pandemic, we've had to operate as normal while still enforcing a lockdown as such. So very different aspect for us. And we have experienced things that we never thought we would experience. Bearing in mind, we have fantastic emergency planners. We know about previous pandemics, but nothing on this scale were worldwide. And there are some things that have caught all of us by surprise. Just some context, Guy's and St Thomas's, 17,000 staff, and normally 2.5 million patient contacts. Even in lockdown, we still have one of the busiest maternity units in London. We have an A&E department, we have a children's hospital, and we have a cancer centre. So they are all primary services, and we still need to deal with people. And then, of course, we are also a HCID, which is a highly contagious infectious diseases centre. So we've been dealing with lots and lots of COVID patients. For us, I see that it's been a real opportunity. It's been an opportunity for our staff to be recognised on the stage. I think we were fairly integrated anyway within the core services, but actually the relationship across all disciplines in the health service, I think, has improved dramatically. The internal relationships where we've had staff redeployed off if you like, essential duties, so HR and finance, they've been on the front line with us and exposing them to day-to-day operational issues. That has improved relationships and will improve relations going forward. So we are actually experiencing better team working, and we need to take that forward in business planning. One of the points made earlier, I think it was Martin, about suppliers. And actually what we've done is we've worked differently here. So instead of going to the usual suppliers, we've been working with local businesses. And an example of that is that I've used some security from local hotels. So rather than the security there being furloughed, we've been using them here. They're part of the local business watch, so we know the environment together. We've worked really closely together. They've been working on NHS premises, and it's a really good, solid relationship, and we're going to see how we go forward with that. So also that will be about thinking differently when we do go back to the market, and actually not doing things as we've always done them. Let's look at other markets and let's see what they bring to the table. Because we've actually found that we've really benefited from working with other sectors. So that's been really good. So for us, you know, the lockdown is still operational. We've been on lockdown since 23rd of March, and we have to manage our access 24/7, 365 days. Our motto out of this will be that we operate, we adapt, and we plan, and we're going to keep going round in that cycle. The next challenge for us post-COVID, of course, is that we have to try and make our premises. We've got to implement some form of social distancing. And if anyone's been in the hospital and used the lifts, will understand the challenge that we have there.
Jane, thank you very much indeed. One more opening statement to go. Just before I come to Glen, don't forget, if you've got a question, your question answer button at the bottom of your screen. If you get your questions in early, I'll endeavour to come to them during the discussion that follows. So finally, in terms of opening statements, back to the Netherlands. Glen, yours, please.
Thank you, Martin. I'm working over the last 3 months with a number of security directors, both in industry and in government and with international institutions. I see now for the coming year, foresee 4 major strategic challenges for corporate security directors. The first major challenge, I think, is going to be to adapt to new operating requirements, which are shifting on an ongoing basis. That means, in effect, that security will have to support and enforce security measures to a very large extent. When we think about new protocols, we think about personal protection equipment, PPE, we think about social distancing, all this sort of thing. That's going to be a new operating environment where security is going to have to support and enforce on behalf of safety. Second main strategic challenge I see is adapting to evolving security threats. We're already seeing, of course, with work from home, the cyber threat shifting, but also I think towards the future physical crime. And in particular, I think economic downturn and economic impacts are going to be a major driver of security incidents. I think looking up ahead, we will not only see more crime, I mean, literally as people are losing their job, and losing their income, and losing their savings, but also I think we're going to see some more worker strikes, we're going to see some more worker activism, we're probably going to see some more threats. Think about the context of downsizing and people losing their jobs and layoffs. and there's going to be security threats as well as safety threats around travel resuming in the future. The third main strategic challenge that I see is that entire business models are being reworked. That means companies are going to be restructuring. There may be less offices in the future. There may be departments that are going to merge or change or gain greater prominence. For instance, the potential there for more mergers of safety and security departments to the extent that they're not already, but adapting to whatever that new business model is going to be. And the fourth main strategic challenge that I foresee at this moment is having to deal with a second wave outbreak and or variations thereof. Those may be, instead of big waves, small wavelets, including a major outbreak within your company or in the city where you're headquartered, or in different countries where you're operating. But that will call for more crisis management preparedness and crisis management engagement. Now, 5 additional key points, I think, beyond the 4 strategic challenges. One is to ensure you have a backup team and that your suppliers in security have a backup team, because this is literally people being removed from the chessboard. Be ready for that in order to continue functioning. Second, to maintain as security your own position vis-a-vis safety. You're there to support them, but you have to watch out for the 9/11 effect, where security suddenly became very prominent. Now I think we're seeing that safety in many ways, rightly so, is becoming very prominent. But I would also warn you don't want to become underneath or a position beneath safety. Third point is, I think we're going to need to do a lot more due diligence. We're all working with new partners, a lot of new virtual business being performed. So the due diligence function of corporate security, I think, will be highlighted in the year ahead. Fourth, I think we're going to need to work on a more robust crisis management preparedness. We're going to have a lot of incidents happen as an outflow of this. I mentioned some of them, but the economic downturn being one, layoffs, downsizing. So we're going to have to be prepared to manage that. And finally, to continue to engage the business at the C-suite level to maintain a presence from early stages of reopening and restarting and refresher strategies. So as you're coming out in a 2.0 company in the future, your planning for security and your responsibility is taken into account and everything from the start, and you don't have to play catch up in the process. Thank you.
Ben, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come to Bob with a question that builds on something you raised there, Glen. In an earlier webinar, it was made, a point was made that the COVID-19 impact on business has been much better for emergency planning, contingency planning, crisis management departments and teams than it has for security. And in fact, it's made businesses think, wait a minute, we need a good crisis managed contingency team. We'll build security within that. I just wonder, given that 25% of the top companies in the US haven't got a security team, is it because perhaps they think like that or will think like that? Is there any value in that point of view? Bob, your thoughts?
You know, Martin, I don't have as much insight in the business continuity world. In the companies we're dealing with now, one of our topics is always what's working well, what's not working well. It's not an even split, but a lot of companies we've talked to, the business continuity crisis management team has performed terribly in this situation. And in a number of cases, security stepped in and is now running the show. Part of that, I think, based on what I can tell, is that I think most of the people that are in business continuity crisis management have a fabulous background in technology, process, systems, a lot of times organizational skills, but this is really a people issue. At the end of the day, this is a people crisis at every level. And that's where, in at least the cases where we know security's had to step in, where they've failed is managing the people side of it. The organizations themselves, we hear repeatedly that business continuity has taken a backseat for years and years. You know, nobody wanted to do drills, nobody wanted to do tabletops. kick the can down the road a little farther. It won't happen on my shift. We'll go ahead and do it. And I think that, you know, management often has 20/20 hindsight. My dad used to say to me, he said, "Bob, you never learn anything cheap." And I think that's, at least in corporate America, that's been the more of the attitude around business continuity. I think the UK, the bombings and a number of things that you went through were miles ahead of the US in continuity and planning. Other countries, you know, it depends on when their last one occurred, you know, so you take tsunamis and earthquakes and volcanoes, and you know, those countries have 20/20 hindsight all of a sudden, and then they're much more robust. I don't think there's one statement that fits them all. We just, again, we see a lot of these variations, different reasons, different configurations, different levels of support. I can tell you on LinkedIn and a lot of the job boards, the #1 job being advertised right now isn't head of security, it's head of business continuity.
That's what I meant though, Bob. Bob, I'm going to move on. Thank you very much indeed for your comment. When I come to Martin, you spoke about a recalibration of relationships. Interesting, Bob makes that point there. What's the context for your relationship in terms of this responding to the crisis team's expertise?
Yeah, well, actually, business continuity in our organisation is, fortunately, unfortunately, it's just been managed away from security, ironically, and it's gone across to a different function. One of the reasons for that is because they recognised that security were very good in managing a crisis, but felt that business continuity was more about being prepared, and that they felt as if that was to be better discharged in another function. And our risks impacting on our business were predominantly driven by cyber or information security, which falls out, maybe unusually, but falls out of the remit of the security community within Royal Mail Group. One of the reasons why I mentioned recalibration with the relationships, however, Martin, was in the context that we're going through transformation as an organisation. It's having to reshape itself, and with that, that means a lot of churn of management and stakeholders. Some of the established relationships, the people have moved on, quite simply, and security itself in this transformation journey has had a 39% churn of management within it. So it's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword that the relationships that were in place and established and trusted and people who knew to go to, that's all changed. And what I'm noticing is that's not a one-off change. This is just non-stop. And it's almost that security have recognised that for our value and our service to be recognised, that we need to be constantly marketing or even rebranding ourselves to new people as they join the organisation, so they understand the value that we can bring, and that we're not the sort of people who say you can't do it, but they actually have an open door and realise that we walk in with a far more positive attitude about how we can help people achieve their individual functional business goals. So it's changing the mindset of a new audience.
Martin, thank you. Jane, I'm going to come to you next, because you spoke about having established good relationships. With whom? What other professionals within the organisation are suddenly you're on good relationships or are forming new types of relationships with?
So I think we've always had good relations, particularly with emergency planning, because we've been integral. Security is integral to the delivery of healthcare, because that's about protecting our staff to do what is their primary function. But I think for me going forwards, actually it's been more at a senior level for all staff. And that's been our very, very senior management and our consultants and our heads of nursing, actually with the security officers on the shop floor, because they are there, they are visible, we are on the entrances, we are talking to people on a daily basis. And I think that one-to-one interaction actually has changed the dynamic. And, you know, the terminology is about all in it together. And I think that's really shone through, certainly for me in my organisation. And it's been really good for the staff. Sometimes security can perceive themselves as not part of healthcare. I think we've completely disestablished that here. And I think going forwards, it's going to be very positive for the security team.
Thank you very much, Jane. Glenn, I'm going to come to you next. I guess this is something that is really quite important, because we can point to pockets of quite exciting new relationships and new opportunities. But often in the area of crisis, the world afterwards goes back to how it was. And I don't mean that we're not going to have a new normal in society. I'm saying that once things settle down, security will be forgotten again. It'll be back where it's been, on the edges. Your thoughts, Glenn?
Well, I think in this case, we're dealing with a pandemic that is going to be spread out over time. Unless we invent a vaccine and get everybody vaccinated very, very quickly, which is unlikely, we have a whole new normal that we need to adjust to. We need to adjust to it both in the virtual world and in the physical world. And pretty soon we're going to need to adjust to it in terms of how we run our business and make our money, given all the impact in economics. So I don't think we're going to go back to a undervaluation, if you will, of security. If anything, the security functioned alongside several others, most certainly safety in and of itself and crisis management. And of course, there's always interlocking and intersections there. But I think security as a function is going to have to be one of the leaders in helping organizations manage how this is going to come out. I think so far, by the way, security has done a reasonable job looking at impacts within companies and looking at the records of different people, but it's still an incomplete picture. So I think the importance of the kind of work that Bob Hayes does with his team is clearly important in this respect. But I think, you know, we're going to be a prominent player in this process for at least a year or 2 years to come until we get to a solid new normal.
Thanks, Glenn. It's an interesting point that you raised there about good performance. In the previous webinars, we've had sort of a mixed message about the effectiveness of corporate security. Bob, I wonder I can come to you on this. Lawrence Gituko, I hope I pronounced your name right, Lawrence, has this question: how far or for how long is security as a function relevant to an organisation? Does security need to be redefined to meet the current business demands, the economic trends, and local global threats? And I guess behind that is Glenn point: how well is it done? Bob, your thoughts?
We're literally working on this as we speak, and the way we're approaching it is, I think we're at a crossroads. We have a chance to remain as gates, guns, and guards to management, that we're guarding and hardware and cameras, or we have a chance to lead the risk picture in this transformation. So we had a company call and said, we're probably going to close 50% of all of our office facilities. 50% of my security officers, 50% of my physical security, 50% of my investigations are all facilities based. Am I going to become irrelevant? Well, it's really a difference of where the new risk is going to go. So if we move people home, it doesn't mean that risk goes away. It's just a different kind of risk. So if somebody is a victim of domestic abuse and you have assigned them to work from home, is that domestic abuse or is that workplace violence now? It's a totally different concept of securing the workplace. And instead of international travelers, we might be dealing with home security and geofencing neighborhoods where we have large populations of employees. I definitely agree. I think we're going to be doing a lot more in the supply chain area. Management's gotten a PhD in supply chain during this. America's got a big PhD in supply chain. I don't know about your countries, but this has been different. So I think it's going to be a big opportunity for some and a big disappointment for others.
Yes, I think that's an interesting point, Bob. Let me come to Jane. I mean, because Jane, you're linked, of course, through your volunteer role with other hospitals around the country. I guess there's a tendency for people in that role to say how good everything is. But I mean, just thinking critically for a minute, clearly some will have performed better than others. And do you think the positive signs that you're pointing out in the context of your own hospital would apply universally across your membership, or predominantly across your membership, and why?
Good question, Martin. I think so, because speaking to other colleagues around the country, most people are experiencing the same issues. We have been talking about what's affecting us and actually how we take things forward and sharing good practice. And it is regionally dependent as to what the issues are. One of the things that we are all absolutely committed to is about the professionalisation of security and how we can do that, and particularly how we can do that in healthcare. So we are all working on this, and we're going to take the positives out of it. We need, of course, to address the negatives where it hasn't worked, where maybe there hasn't been the buy-in so much. But I think it's about us. You know, the word I used earlier was integrated into the organisation's model, and I think we have done that. And one of the points that Bob made earlier is that we're not just delivering security; we are delivering other facilities, services, because we are part of that whole picture. So I think what we'll find is that we will move away from the traditional model, and I liked the expression of gates, guns, and I think it was machines or something. And actually, it's up to us. It's up to us to drive it. And I don't think the time will ever be better for us to professionalise ourselves. One of the things we must remember to do, of course, is it's about the risk assessments. And we need to look at what's happening, where it's happening, and making sure that we are fit for purpose going forwards.
Thank you, Jane. Martin, I'm going to come to you next. A few questions about models here. You in your talk mentioned this very important point, I thought, about the potential to look differently in terms of outsourcing security. I just wonder what the drivers for that will be, because if it's to produce a different sort of security model, that's potentially interesting. All too often, as indeed has been raised on the previous webinars, this is a different way of saying we want to cut costs and get a cheaper delivery, and the knock-on effects of that, of course, are quite dramatic. What's driving it from where you are? Can I just ask everybody, please, if you're going to ask a question, make sure you do it on the question and answers button at the bottom of the screen, not other buttons. Martin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, Martin, that obviously commercial pressures are on us like they are any other organisation, and obviously in a post-COVID environment, I think it's inevitable that you know, we hear the word about recession or double recession. So that's kind of what's driving it in many ways, about overheads and costs. So there's no two ways of getting about it. One thing I would say, though, bring it back, I mentioned transformation, and one of the requirements of our transformation model was to absolutely deploy resource on a resource to risk basis. So we've got a similar situation that I think Jane was referring to in the size and scale of the organisation. We have an internal and external threat risk that we have to look at. And externally, we've got 140,000 employees in the UK, 200,000 worldwide, going to 29 million addresses every day. And with that brings some risk. Now, the part of the flexible resourcing model is obviously as and when you get risks under control or new or emerging risks begin to manifest themselves, we need to be agile. And we need to be agile where it might be fraud in one particular period, it might be external crime in another. And to try and have an internal resource that is the master and expert in all the areas all of the time, covering all 29 million addresses and all the nuances that go with providing a service like that, we're just stepping back and going, okay, we might have a core group of people within group security that perform a range of activities with an acceptance that if any new or emerging risks that are either planned or generally unplanned come across our desk, we have the ability to go and outsource it rather than train and equip people, gold plate everybody for skills that they might not be using on a day-to-day basis. So it's kind of having the muscle memory to serve the business internally efficiently, but also have the ability to act quickly in an agile state to any new or emerging risks impacting our customers or indeed the internal organisation. And that's the concept behind it, Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I mean, that question was inspired by Leander Fernandez and Sonia Knowles. I just want, when I come to Glen, I want to come to you again about for your perception on something that's happened in the UK, which has been quite dramatic. And that's the finding that security officers, security guards, as they're often called abroad, are amongst those groups most likely to have died during the crisis. Does that surprise you, Glenn, in any way, as a non-UK person?
Not really. I mean, if you think about the forward exposure of guards, you know, when we think about our work, it's risk management. And if there's ever an issue that, you know, where we're talking about risk, it's this pandemic. And it may be, the main cause may be health related versus what we're mostly used to, which is human actors presenting the threat. But indirectly, of course, it is human actors. And when you think about all the functions security guards have, from frontline access control functions to handling incidents and helping other people, and normally being the first responders, if you will, for most corporations, and we're looking at the context of corporations here, then I'm not that surprised to see that, you know, also the selflessness of many of these people, where often, irrespective of potential danger or known danger, they come to assist other people. I'm not that surprised that they're high in the numbers. It's unfortunate. It'd be interesting to see as well. I know that in several countries, research is being done, obviously on the healthcare workers was the first category, but also secondarily on first responders in general. And I know that in a number of countries for police personnel, we're seeing a number of studies being done. So I think numbers there will be a bit higher as well.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm going to come to you with some questions that are coming in that actually cover a very similar theme. So Mike Gibbs from the United States has been asking about the number of, it's called termination of security executives. That word doesn't translate well to UK, termination, but I guess it means lose their jobs. I hope so, Mike. And there have been a few high profile ones with security executives, he says. Glenn Kitteringham is talking about what we mean by professionalisation of security. And Brian Sims is asking about whether the makeup of corporate security professionals going forwards is likely to change. Here we go. We're talking about certain security functions not having security or being diminished, or security executives losing their job. It suggests maybe something's not right with that role. And we're talking about a new world of a more professional security. But with your overall experience, I wonder what this begins to look like. Are we looking at a new breed of security professional in the future? And if so, what does he or she or they look like?
It's great. You've summarized that very well, Martin. So in our research, there's three primary catalysts why companies have security officers or security executives. One, they're a risk-based company. They're worried about certain risks. They're a regulatory-based company, finance, electrical energy. Those companies are very heavily regulated and have a lot of security requirements. Hospitals are joining that rank in the US. And then the third one is business value, and retail often falls in that business value, reduced crime, banks, and some of the others are there. So it's more of a value proposition. I think a lot of the disconnects, the terminations, and the lost jobs, and the skills that are going to be necessary in the future are a lot more about misalignment with the company. Companies, industries, sectors are so different now, and one size does not fit all. I think it's a problem with our definition of what a security leader is. A security leader is a business person that manages security risk in a company. We've got a whole project underway called Reimagining Risk. And that's what people really need to do, is they need to reimagine the risks their companies are facing. And then from there, you can start to say, what kind of skills do we need? If it's IT skills, then you better go get them if your company's all around IT. So it's going to be I think, a much more finite definition of what companies need versus this broad, universal job description that we've looked at in the past.
Well, thank you very much indeed. And I'm going to come to you, Glenn, with a similar question. I mean, about what the security profession will look like in the future. And just Stuart Naisbitt has added a bit to that, and about what customers' opinions of security change will be. What are they going to be demanding a different type of thing? Very briefly, if you will, Glenn, because we're getting near the end.
I think as we look ahead and how the security management role might change, or the security manager may be well different from regular staff, but as a whole, I think we're going to see security interact more closely with safety than ever before, and more closely with crisis management than ever before. Because at the very end of the day, safety and security are going to be the key functions that have to operationalize a lot of the activities that need to be done. They're also going to need to be the enforcers, and in some cases they may be the requirement developers, if not the requirement setters. It's a little bit chicken and egg right now, whether governments are going to come up with requirements or whether companies and institutions are going to develop the requirements for what constitutes safe activity. Then very simple example, but is a security guard the one who should now respond to a fight or an incident with somebody saying, you know, I feel ill? Or should that be a health safety expert? More likely, and that's what we're seeing evolving, it's a combination. And I think we're going to see that in the role of security as a whole, that quite often now in a lot of these contexts around COVID-19 worldwide, in the corporate context, security is going to have to be involved in collaborative efforts around issues that extend beyond just the security domain, but where security is one vital piece that needs to be added.
Glenn, thank you very much indeed. Jane, is your job going to change as a result of this crisis? Very, very briefly, if you wouldn't mind.
I actually think it will, and I think it will move more. I will have more involvement in the business continuity planning. Obviously, there was involvement before, but you know, there have been great lessons for us on this. One of the things I do want to emphasise is that working with other suppliers, as I alluded to earlier, it's made me think differently about who we'd employ, and maybe I'm going to start thinking about the role of security in healthcare, and actually some of the other skill sets that we can take from some of the other sectors. So hopefully I will evolve a bit more along with everyone else. Just want to take one of the things from what Glenn,
Jane, be very quick. 15 seconds, please.
What Glenn said earlier. He said that security can be the enforcers. I'd like to say that we're going to be the encouragers.
Thank you very much indeed. Martin, I haven't spoken to your boss, and I know that he's very pleased with you, so you're not going to lose your job. But I wonder whether you think it's going to change, Martin. And again, if I could just ask you in 15 seconds your thoughts.
Yes, I think it will, because as you know, my boss has led the whole response for the whole business. He heads up technically the health and safety department. We're merging. There's clearly going to be opportunities there in terms of working together with that function, learning how safety have got at the front of the queue. Thank you.
Martin, thank you very much. You were just drifting out there, actually. But just final point from all the panel, just 15 seconds, if you will, no more. I'm going to ask each of you for your final comments. So, Martin, your final comments, please, your thoughts about where we go from here. Martin, 15 seconds.
Very thought-invoking. I've taken some issues away. It's just helped me think outside of the box. So thank you, everybody, for their contribution.
Martin, thank you. Bob, your thoughts about where we go from here. 15 seconds, please.
It's a very new day. Start over, go through the process, and redefine who you are and what you do, and line it up with the organization that you work with.
Thank you very much indeed. Bob, Jane, your final comments, please. Just 15 seconds.
Okay, so I'll agree with the redefining the role, but let's not forget the emphasis, please, on risk assessment, training, and with that we can show value for money.
Thank you very much indeed. And Glenn, I'm going to leave the final comment to you. Just 15 seconds, if you wouldn't mind, please.
I think alongside healthcare, that security right now and in the near future will probably go through its finest hour. And I think in terms of our purpose, we've never been more relevant than ever in helping other people.
Panel, thank you so much for your insightful comments, and thank you for an excellent set of questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to more of them. What we always try and do is have a compact and succinct argument and leave you wanting more. So hopefully we've done that. Oh, and we'll be back with more on Tuesday when we'll be looking at the value of security teams. And one of Bob's colleagues actually will be on that. This is just to remind you that in talking about outstanding security performers, that entries are open across the world. In fact, Norway opens on Monday, and we'd like to encourage you, please, that if you know just one person, one team, one company who's doing an outstanding job, do take the time to recognise them, because being good at security has enormous implications, and we need to be aware of who those people are and make sure that we recognise and learn from them. So next Tuesday about security value, and next Thursday we're talking about security careers. Once again, thank you very much indeed to the audience around the world for asking questions. Thank you to my panel. You may want to say bye on your own right. Bye from the panel.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
And bye from me, and wherever you are in the world, stay safe and hopefully see you on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.